mailbox happen, and you tell them it's full, you tell them it's empty. So we ought to have a law that you have to get your mail every day.
Okay.
That was all that,
I think that should be up to the individual, whether they get their mail or not. I mean,
Yeah, it's a law that you spend more money for someone to enforce it than it would do anything. We're either gonna fine somebody because they didn't go get their mail.
Joe?
I'm just gonna leave the motion be voted on and not
Okay.
discuss.
So we got a
this.
second?
I think we've discussed it.
I was the
So second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
One opposed, David. Okay. All right, we'll move on.
Sorry, guys. I got a
Pen three.
very long call pace myself. Go ahead.
So last follow-up, hopefully we can move through this quickly so we can get under that.
Yeah, we might go in the dark here pretty soon.
Mr. Rain asked James to come back and talk about the administrative citations in our collection.
They're on emergency generator.
Why?
Power went out.
Aye.
It's out to the whole south end of the city.
So I believe that you should have
Oh,
the.
all the lights were on when I pulled up everywhere, so I'm like, we got a generator for the whole southern half of the city?
The generator for this.
This data is already something that we were doing, development services, we're doing primarily for Rob, but I think we're going to continue it, so that we were putting this out in the monthly.
Can that be, the microphone be either pulled forward or the volume be increased, because it's very hard to hear you. Or just move a little bit towards it.
Eat the mic.
So I'm not, can you hear
you
me?
just need to speak louder, Dave.
You need to speak louder.
Just speak louder.
You have to have a very white voice.
I will do my best for Mr. Ray.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So this is data that we've been acquiring. So I've already had this, we've been doing this. This primarily was going on the monthly report, the monthly CA newsletter. So this is something that we have. So it's fairly simple. We bring all the data up of all the administrative citations that were issued for last year. And
Is
you
this
can
right
see, if you go across,
Yes.
basically we issued $1,065,000 in administrative citations. Out of that, we only collected one big lump sum of $36,000. That was in September, and that was specifically on a 4-unit condo or townhome complex up on Jackson that we were pushing for receivership, and through Fred and through our lawyer went to court. We actually got a receivership on this. They put a receiver in charge. He sold the property, and then the city was able to recoup all of our hard costs that we talked about, of boarding it up, of having our city attorney, going through all the process. So we recouped the hard money, but that is far in between, as you can see. If the person or whether it's a homeowner or business, if they are compliant, which is what we want, and they go ahead and fix the problems that my code officers have called out, it's administratively basically X off out in the field. So, like I was saying last time, if my code officers write up, 10 violations, and they give the homeowner or the business owner 2 weeks to do it, and they go back out in 2 weeks, and 9 of the violations are done, they just X them off. And then they say, okay, we're going to give you another week or another 2 weeks for that final citation. They go back, if it's done, it's X out. That's where we have things, because we want compliance. We're not necessarily trying to penalize people. Yes?
Question, but in fact I have more than one, but the first question is, when the code enforcement officers go out, do they ask the person that they contact whether they're a renter or an owner?
Yes. They find that out. And if they are a renter, then they do the research. And they actually do this prior. Again, first thing is what we call a knock and talk. They go knock on it, and they give a courtesy notice, and they just talk to the individual. It doesn't matter at that point if it's the tenant or the owner. If they take care of it, they say, okay, we didn't realize that this was a city code issue, we'll take care of it. And if they're complying, in the following couple of weeks, we're good. And it stops there. But if they're not paying attention, then my officers do some research on it. We go through the PIN system or whatever, and we find out if the person they talk to is actually the tenant or the owner. Because a lot of times they don't tell us, even though we ask. So once we start doing research and we're doing the notice of violations when they're getting ready to do that, they do a whole, we reach out to PD and we find out some information as much as we can. So we get as much information as we can before we start doing NOVs or citations, yes.
Now, when we discussed this at the last meeting, I asked you what the process was, and you said first there's a courtesy notice. Then the next step is a notice of violation, correct?
Correct.
And the next step was a final notice of violation.
Sometimes it gets to that, yes.
And then after that, it's the administrative citation, correct?
Correct.
And that not all administrative citations lead to a fine, is that correct?
No, well, let me clarify that. When administrative citation is written, there's a fine on the paperwork. Right then and there, when it's written, we're giving a fine to the person. Whether or not that fine gets, we have to actually take it and collect the money, depends on if that person.
What I understood though, is that they have, once they're issued an administrative citation, they're only allowed, they are allowed so many days to correct it, and then there will be no fine, no lien against the property. Is that correct?
That's
or is
correct.
that incorrect?
Oh, that's correct. If they comply in the 2 weeks, or depending on the citation, sometimes it's such a bad situation, we'll give them a month. But if they comply in that month, we're good, it gets erased.
So here's my question. Now that we know there's a courtesy notice, we know there's a notice of violation, we know there's a final notice of violation, you've got a number here, and it says number of violation notices issued. Is that for the first notice of violation, or is that for the final notice of violation? Or is that a combined total of both?
Total of both for that month.
Okay. And of all the administrative citations that are issued, it shows a total here of only 27. That sounds like, to me, a very low number of administrative citations. So what I'm going to ask about that is, are those representative of how many where it actually went to a fine, or how many of those were the violation or violations corrected where there was no fine?
Okay, what you're looking at 27, that's a court citation. So that's actually when they ignore us and it actually goes to court.
Okay, so we're up to, then, okay, I looked at the wrong
So
one.
it's one.
Number of